Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. This is Gemini Brett of More Than Astrology. Today is Monday, the day of the moon, October 23rd, 2017. It is my solar return. And one of the things I will do today is return to a presentation I delivered yesterday to Organization of Professional Astrology at their Art of Living and Dying retreat at Zion National Park. My video died a bit as I was presenting, and though all attendees will record an audio of my transmission along with those delivered by so many wonderful presenters at the retreat, I feel that a visual interaction with this material is kind of necessary to get it. A bit about me. Astrology found her way to me in 2012, and I began my formal study the next year with the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, Daniel Jamario and Kaylin Castell. I've since branched out to study many wonderful branches of this endless tree called astrology, from Hellenistic to evolutionary, and I'm synthesizing my own way. One of my principal devotions is to remind astrologers to look up and to connect to the living sky. I'm really about renaturing astrology. So astrology and astronomy, we say, were once one and the same. It's often actually said, back in the day anyway, that astrology was two things: astronomy, one, and correspondences. And for the most part, that's where our attention goes these days. But what about this living connection with the sky, maybe this older way? So often people know about my passion for astronomy, and they'll talk about the observatory and the telescope up the hill, and that's cool, but that's not really my game. I'm not about the scopes, which look so far away and back in time and kind of narrow our view. I'm about opening it up. I'm about laying with my back on the sacred ground, looking up and engaging with how the sky and Earth work in this sacred dance. And I learn a lot by moving around the globe and connecting to sacred sites and rings of stone circles and whatnot, to fascinate how maybe the ancients who were at the root of our craft kept the days and tracked the seasons and these types of things. So I try to present this information not in such a nerdy, sterile modern day mechanistic science way, but rather to share my passion for this. And so we'll do a bit of that today. However, I do like to start all presentations with a short story. The difference with the one that I will share right now and my typical presentations is I'm not usually sharing about myself, but I thought I would do so today. I wanted to speak about a bit of the art of living and dying that has already come my way with this transit of Jupiter into Scorpio. We know Jupiter ingressed Scorpio on October 10th, 2017. All right. Hey, baby, what's your sign? Well, it's my solar return in October, so I guess I don't even know. Why do I call myself Gemini when I'm a Scorpio? Maurice made sure to out me at the banquet at the retreat on Saturday, but did so, and then many of you lovely beings sang happy birthday to me, and I was really lifted by that. Thank you. So am I hiding because of this mess? Perhaps. Well, I have a Gemini moon and a Gemini ascendant, and being of the night sect in Hellenistic astrology, the moon, the Gemini moon, is, my sect light. And also back in the day, it was really about your helm, the ascendant, and the lord of the hour marker, who in my case, because I'm Gemini rising, is Mercury. So there's another piece of this thing, which is I feel so imperatively that you are so much more than your sun sign. So I think I was trying to get a bit of way of identifying myself only with Scorpio, which is how I knew myself to be solely for so long. But I'm kind of perpetuating some archetypal stereotypes, aren't I? Scorpio in hiding and Gemini living two lives. Anyway, so here's a tale. Mercury, the lord of my hour marker, right? The ruler of the Gemini ascendant. We don't see the horizon in a whole sign chart. unless we bring it in, the ascendant, the midheaven. And when we do, we get to see this grand air trine, which you may or may not consider as a piece of my nativity. I'm fond of saying it is. But again, that requires the horizon, the degree of the ascendant itself, right? Not just Gemini. In a sense, I guess, whole sign, there's that anyway. So this just happened. This is very early in the morning, October 18th, 2017. Mercury conjoined Jupiter in Scorpio right at my sun. That won't happen again for how long? Do you know what the Mercury-Jupiter cycle is to a sign? 71 years. So I'm not going to be around, most likely. I think I'll practice some more of the art of dying before then. Anyway, if you studied with Owner Dozer at the OPA Retreat, if you were part of his tract, you would be able to see in this chart that I am a sixth house perfected year. Yeah, 41 years old, the sixth house. And many would then consider the Time Lord for the year from a Hellenistic view as Mars, the traditional ruler of the sign of Scorpio. But some look more to planets that are in that sign, and for me that would be the Sun. And Mercury is the Lord of the month for me, being in the perfected house of the month, which is fifth house, and Mercury lives there in Libra. So as the perfected month Lord conjoins by transit, the perfected year Lord, and with Jupiter, some wild stuff came. Now, at the same time, they're kind of realigning to this Sun-Uranus conjunction in my chart, the Sun-Saturn square. And meanwhile, Saturn across the chart is in opposition, transiting my Gemini moon, with Chiron on the square to that. And Chiron in Pisces, Saturn in Sagittarius, these two signs traditionally associated with who? With Jupiter. Jupiter, who's transiting the sun in the perfected house of the year. And okay, maybe we're getting too deep into astrological technique, but anyway, Jupiter in my nativity lives here, the 11th house, which is the house of what? Of Facebook. So as I was sitting in this house, my father's house, just before coming to the retreat in the early morning hours of October 18th, I got this email from Mark Zuckerberg and crew telling me that I can't call myself Gemini Brett anymore unless I can prove this is my name with federal issued documentation. And so that's not happening. So Brett Joseph is the name on Facebook. My father's name, my grandfather's name. Now, it's very interesting to me that I received this email, not only with Mercury and Jupiter at my sun in Scorpio, perhaps asking me to come out and be authentic in my Scorpio ways. We shall see. But that I was here because my grandfather, George Joseph, passed away this year in July. The eclipse, which was yet to come, was exact his Leo Saturn. My father has Leo Saturn, as do I. And so here in this house where my grandfather recently died, just hundreds of feet from where I sit now, this thing came around that says, be a Joseph, share your name. And there's a lot of hang-ups about that, but that's not the tale for right now. So there's just a little journey into my own art of living and dying. Now, there's many ways where Jupiter conjoined Sun can play by transit, right? In fact, I publicly announced 7 seconds before my number was called that I would win the raffle the other night, at least a portion of it, and I did, and I won Owner's video course, which I'm really looking forward to, because though I'm a very modern astrologer, I really love these ancient techniques and looking into the roots of our craft and some of that languaging. Anyway, so tale for another time. But so Jupiter at my sun, and I won, and I had 150 people or whoever it was at the banquet singing happy birthday to me. What a treat. So thank you for that, all of you, and thank you, Maurice, and thank you, Maurice, also my track leader, for diving into not only this tale with me, but some of the relationship aspects shown in my soul song, which is what I like to call the nativity, which is very healing for me during my track. And this is what our arts of the chart are about, right? Healing, feeling, knowing, growing. So what a treat. If you are seeing this and you have not been to an OPA retreat, do so. What a wonderful thing. I'm very glad I had the opportunity to go, and what an honor to have an opportunity to present. I lost my name tag just as I'm having this moniker confusion. And then it was returned to me the next day by my track leader who seemed to add a couple things that symbolized maybe my true sign and this Joseph last name, and he made sure to know who the leader of my track was. Anyway, so I might not know what my sign is, but I do know my azimuth. And that's what I wanted to speak with you about today and yesterday, as I did. Azimuth, which is one of these great astronomical terms. And again, I'm after this kind of from a sacred astronomy, kind of a spiritual or astrological perspective. But what is azimuth? What is mine? Here it is. I was born in Boston, and the azimuth was about 60 degrees, 59 and change, about 30 degrees north of east. And it shot off through Newfoundland and France and very close to Rome, through Crete, right through Alexandria and Cairo. And so what I'm suggesting is that this azimuth, which I consider to be the shamanic direction, is calling me back to some of these old ways that we did the astrological craft. And then it's bringing me further into the desert, Saudi Arabia. So I think maybe I'm meant to do it in this way, through this marriage of heaven and earth. And so an opportunity for a plug, I will be presenting a video course. One of you won in the silent auction. Attendance will start in January, be 12 hours, I think, in 6 2-hour sessions with some question and answer sessions in between. If you miss a lesson, you catch up with it by video later, and then it will be documented and up, and I'm sure I'll be editing it as I go along in the future, but it's something that you'll be able to join. So whether you're hearing this now in 2017 or early 2018, enough time to join the course live. There will be probably other live offerings in the future, and it will be documented so you can watch post-recording. And the idea is sacred astronomy for astrologers. So I hope you'll sign up. You can check it out at morethanastrology.com. Go over to services, scroll all the way down. If you don't see a link for the course there, it's not up yet. You will see a link to sign up for my mailing list, and I will send you a note about it once it's ready to go. You can also shoot me an email at morethanastrology@gmail.com. All right. So the marriage of heaven and earth, and of course, I'm not the only one called. I love that I was able to dance with friends under the sky and the stars at Zion National Park and teach some of what the sky has taught me. So this, I think, is a wonderful time to say enough about me. And what about us? What is the azimuth of this organization that we have chosen to participate with, the Organization of Professional Astrology, who was born in Tallahassee, Florida at 1:45 p.m. on October 4th, 2000, with Capricorn on the rise. And Capricorn, of course, rises south of east, right? All right, maybe you don't know that yet. I'll get back into the technique. We'll do a big rewind. But first, let me just show you that this touches land here, and maybe only here. So I would say, I think, Anguilla. I don't even know how to pronounce the name of this island, but it sure looks so beautiful, very close to the Virgin Islands, as you can see. And it's the only landfall of the azimuth moving southeast for OPA at the time of the organization's birth. So I'm thinking we should have a retreat right there. Sounds good, right? This shamanic direction goes on to just skirt the northern coast of Brazil and just below Cape Town, South Africa. So it's kind of water world. But that's a good way to rewind. In fact, let's go all the way back to the beginning. For in the beginning, the entire world was water, covered in the chaos of the sea. But then came the light, Amun-Ra, and he brought forth land, the Ben stone. And then company, Tefnut and Shu, moisture and air, and together they ruled. And Tefnut and Shu had a great love. From their union came 2 twins, Jeb and Nut, who also had a fond love for one another, but it was not meant to be. They were cursed to be separated for all calendar days, for they had jobs to do. Nut, mother sky, and Jeb, father earth. So she arced above him, touching her toes and fingers to his sacred land, longing to touch so much more, and he longing to touch her. But they were cursed to be separated to do these jobs. Yet though Jehuti heard their plea, heard their prayer, and answered, he challenged the moon at the ancient game of Senate again and again and again and again he won, and for his winnings he demanded Moon increase her brilliance. And when she did, 5 extra days came our way, because before this time there were 360 days in a year, and that was the curse. Jeb and Newt separated for all 360 days of the calendar year. So when Moon increased her brilliance and 5 more days came our way, this marriage of heaven and earth can be celebrated, and from that union came twins, Set, Isis, Osiris, Nephthys, or Sion. And Sion is a wonderful place to participate with the marriage of heaven and earth, this sacred union that has been celebrated in sacred sites all around the world, close to our retreat, Chimney Rock, which honors the 18.6-year lunar standstill cycle. Here's a winter solstice image from Stonehenge. The equinox shadow serpent at the pyramid of Kukulkan, Chichen Itza. Serpent Mound in Ohio, which aligns to the solstices, equinox, Beltane too, and lunar standstill. The Newgrange Passage Grave in Ireland, where the December solstice light ignites the passage grave. There's also a Sirius alignment, perhaps from back in the day, not anymore due to precession of the equinoxes. The same can be said for one of the so-called ventilation shafts of the Great Pyramid in Giza, which is one of 3 pyramids aligning to the 3 kings, the belt of Orion, who was known as Osiris, Asur in the skies, over Egypt. Robert Bravall first brought this to attention, modern mind. Same thing in pyramid sites in China, Mexico. And these sites, which are not pyramids, but in Washington, D.C., White House, Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial, aligned as Orion's belt. This is something I go into in depth in a 3-hour, 33-minute, and 33-second video you can find on YouTube. It's called Washington Deciphered, the Star Mysteries of D.C. Have a look. It's a wild trip. And it's amazing that in D.C., these sacred alignments, this compass on the ground aligns to the azimuth of Sirius and Aldebaran, both setting and rising from the Capitol building to the White House, and on the other azimuth down Maryland Avenue to where Jefferson Memorial is now. Aligned to Sirius. And by the way, it won't always be, because precession of the equinoxes will shift that fixed star's azimuth and altitude. This is Temple of Luxor in Karnak, Egypt. And they had to realign 3 times to track the azimuth of Sirius. That's how long this temple was around for. It's a wonderful book by Schwaller de Lubitz. It would seem those cats at the Vatican enjoy that geometry that was honored on the ground in Luxor long before. And the Vatican is very cardinally aligned as well. So is this building, the Spring Hill Suites Marriott in Zion National Park, where I gave this talk yesterday and where we heard all of these presentations and played this organization of professional astrology. This door faces due west, faces the equinox sunsets. How do I know? Well, before my roommate and I went out playing, we did a little work, all right? So this image, it might be faint on your screen, but in the upper right, you might see Cassiopeia, all right? And those who came out with me under the night sky, and I was very happy to hear many of them yell this out when I asked yesterday, giving this presentation, we often track the North Star Polaris in our time by using the Big Dipper Ursa Major. The Ursa Major was not visible in Zion in the evening hours when we were out under the sky during October, because it's hiding behind a mountain in the north. So you can also work with Cassiopeia to find Polaris, to find North Star. She opens up in that direction. And Cassiopeia is on the exact opposite side of Polaris than Big Dipper. So if weather's clear, you usually get either one or the other. And it's nice to find the pole star because it's due north. It's the star about which all the others spin, for it is the spin axis of the Earth. The spine of Gaia points directly at that star in our time, and it is said that in our time, according to the modern model, we have the most precisely dialed in North Star of all time, Polaris. So it is a wonderful time for us to get redirected, reconnected to the sacred directions, which we, Northern Hemispheres beings, can do so easily by just learning where to see Polaris. So because Polaris is right above this column, it is facing due north. And because it is due north, this window inside the building due east. So you could witness the exact alignment of the equinox sunrise, both in spring and fall, right? Wrong. Why? Because the 12th house is hidden things. Can you see why? Do we ever see what's on the rise? Sometimes, but usually mountains, trees will keep us from seeing the horizon, or even clouds. If you have an ocean view, many of you who live near the beach know that to be true. But just because we can't see it doesn't mean we don't be it. And there's something about these sacred alignments. Now, the cardinal directions are one thing, and I'm very happy that these cats worked with the star and not with the compass, because the magnetic north is not true north. The star certainly is. But you can see 3 different alignments of this building. The doors due east, and then it takes a bit of a shift towards the north, and then another one. And the second azimuth was the building where we had the conference lectures, where we were sitting when I delivered this yesterday. And amazingly, it is aligned to winter solstice, sunset, and summer solstice, sunrise. This is how I knew. I did a little shadow work. So you can see my shadow parallel to the sidewalk here, which is parallel to that zone of the building. And I took this shadow photo at 5:05 p.m. on October 21st. The reason why I did so is because using this brilliant software, Stellarium, I found that at the time, the sun is at an azimuth of 240 degrees. And that means my shadow was pointing the other way. Thinking about turning around on a skateboard, you do a 180, right? So I would either add 180 to 240, but since that takes me over 360 degrees, the number of degrees in a circle, I subtract 180 from 240 to get 60 degrees. That's the azimuth that my shadow was facing at this time, from an azimuth of 240 at my feet, through my hands up there, azimuth of 60 degrees, which is where the summer solstice sun rises in the latitudes of Zion National Park, while the winter solstice sun sets at an azimuth of 240 degrees. This slide, by the way, once again to show that we could not see the summer solstice sun rising at that azimuth. Why? Because the 12th house, among many other things, is hidden things. But just because you don't see it doesn't mean you don't be it. So why are these magical alignments happening? What are we after here? I mean, was this intentional at a Spring Hill Marriott in Zion National Park? What was the intention of this, which was at the Hampton, the hotel I was staying at down the way? Is there any intention? Is this some secret society symbolism left for us to awaken through? Or is it just that we are in the riddle of the mysteries? And as astrologers, we are engaging with them consciously, intentionally. But perhaps if we do not engage with them, or even if we do, they engage with us. So I find it incredible that Zion is at one of the, it's at the only latitude on Earth, rather north or south, either would work, that the solstices are 30 degrees azimuth from the equinoxes. Equinox sunrise, sunset is due east, due west. So 90 degrees to 70 degrees azimuth. And at Zion National Park, an azimuth of 60 degrees, 30 degrees north of east on the summer solstice rise, an azimuth of 240 degrees, 30 degrees south of west for the winter solstice on the set. So in Zion, the solstices and the equinoxes mapped to a whole sign or equal sign image, which is a zodiacal wheel, right? 30 degrees per sign. Pretty amazing thing, at least maps to that geometry. And I believe this geometry, this is called the seed of life, is simply how creation creates, and that this is why we have 12 signs, but that's a long tale for another time. Some of you heard me speak about it under the stars a bit at the retreat. And I wear this symbol on my neck to remind me of this path that I'm on. And I am no longer disturbed when I see the signs all around me. Look familiar? So this is a do not disturb sign hanging on our door at the Hampton Inn. And this was the lamps in the meeting room there. 12 lights separated in 4 divisions of 3 elements, modalities. Above the table, there was a stack of 3 of these for 36 lights. The faces, the deacons. Can you see the earth glyph here? All around the mysteries. 72 of these, the amount of years it takes for a precession of the equinoxes to move 1 degree in azimuth. So I saw this wheel one morning, and then I came to lecture and walked by the silent auction and saw Chris Brennan's Hellenistic Astrology, the Study of Fate and Fortune book, where we see this wheel of 12. What is it about? The wheel of fortune? Or the helm? This is a word that was used to describe the ascendant, it is said in Hellenistic times, the helm of the ship. And many people will speak about the steersman, since it describes the hour marker or the ascendant, which is really what makes you, you, isn't it? This is a really, I think, important thing for us as astrologers to know. We measure astrology not from the surface of Earth where we can see it, but rather from the center of Earth. You may have noticed some slight discrepancies between the time of a chart wheel and an eclipse in the sky, for example. That's because we see eclipses from the surface, but we measure them from the center. Now, astronomer, rational science folks might have a heyday with that and tell us why we're so blind or whatever, but they don't get, perhaps if they would argue this, the beauty and the poetry of the truth that we measure geocentrically, Earth center. Because for me, it's the celestial symphony, the heavenly harmonies. Each planet has an instrument, a tone, playing perhaps the exact note of the sign in which it resides. And this celestial symphony resonates in the heart of Gaia and the core of our beautiful Earth. And she broadcasts that symphony to each of us simultaneously in all directions. And so the chart of the moment by aspect, by sign, it's the same for everywhere on the globe. The time, as we know, is what time and place is necessary to find the hour marker, to find the ascendant, and to find azimuth, right? To find the helm. What is this helm? Iakos, Angela taught me, I believe, is the pronunciation for this. Not studied Greek. What is this about? In astrology, the hour marker ascendant is called Iakos, rudder of the chart, by which the native's fate is turned. It zodiacally represents the time and place where the child comes into being, manifest in the physical world, and thus subject to some kind of fate. Most of the lots, whose very name prompts connection with one's allotment or fate, project from the same ascendant. Dorian Geisler Greenbaum from her The Daimon in Hellenistic Astrology. You might know the lots as the parts, by the way, like the part of fortune, which is calculated, as she's sharing here, from not only moon and sun, but from the ascendant, the exact degree of the hour marker. Ruled over by some daimon, some demon is at the helm of your ship. Or perhaps you've chosen an angel. Or perhaps, you know, for me with Gemini on the rise, the daimon, or the one who's got the hands on the wheel to steer my rudder, is Mercury, right? Or what if it's us? What if it's you? A human without a purpose is like a ship without a rudder, never likely to reach home port. Direction. So I want to share in shamanic astrology this paradigm vision forth by Daniel Gemario, we work with the ascendant in the way that most modern astrologers are working with the North Node, the forward direction of the soul. We work with the North Lunar Node in this regard as well, but not strictly so. And I mean, I love the nodes. I love these many evolutionary astrology techniques, the sign of the nodes, the house of the nodes, perhaps maybe more specific to you, the ruler of the house of the nodes, the ruler of the sign of the nodes, the ruler of the house in which the ruler of the sign of the nodes resides. I mean, so many ways to pet this cosmic cat. But if we're only saying North Node is the forward direction, we're also saying that up is the way to go, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. For in the Northern Hemisphere, North Node is where the moon ups from Earth past the line of Spirit, which is the ecliptic towards the heavens. But in the Southern Hemisphere, the North Node downs. And that's something I'll be getting deeply into in this Marriage of Heaven and Earth video course. I think it's a really important contemplation for all of us. But the ascendant in this azimuth is so uniquely you. I was born 9 degrees 36 minutes Gemini on the rise, okay? And that happens every day, everywhere on Earth. But that azimuth that I'm speaking about here, and I'll show you more about what I mean, that's particular to my place of birth at that time as well. So shamanic astrology, Daniel looks at that rising sign kind of as what we're here to learn in life. Like, I'm here to learn. I'm here to study in the Gemini Mystery School. And there's a lot more to say about that. But I'd like to say what is rising when you rose is rising within you. And that literally, and this didn't come to me from shamanic astrology, but this thing, there is this like direction, this rudder, this angle, this helm, this azimuth. And I'm really feeling that perhaps it is calling us in some way for a physical visit, emotional, spiritual, whatever it may be, to these places on Earth. So we'll get in our old boat, right? I show this to show that in these Hellenistic times, there was not some wheel on some boat, not some helm, right? The steersmen sit in the back with the rudder. And this rudder is really important in considering azimuth in shamanic direction. So I think most of us know this, that the sun is lower in the winter time and higher in the summertime. This, by the way, as most of what I'll share, I think from here forth, is an image for Northern Hemisphere above the Tropic of Cancer. In the Southern Hemisphere, sun rises in the east, but reaches in the north before resting in the west. Between the tropics, it can kind of go either way. Again, that's the subject for the video, of course. It's an amazing thing to dig into. I will also be presenting, although I don't think that specific material, for Organization of Professional Astrology for one of the members' webinars in November of 2017. So check that out if you're hearing this before then. All right, so altitude. Altitude is the measurement in angular degrees from the horizon, which is 0, to the zenith, which is 90. And I'm just actually realizing that this is at the equator, because only at the equator, well, you know what, sorry. This is measured from the Tropic of Cancer. And I'm getting too technical, pardon me, and it's actually not accurate. So never mind all that. There's no zenith. Straight above you is 90 degrees, and the sun can never zenith unless you're between the tropics. At the equator, it does so on equinox day. At the Tropic of Cancer, it does so, and the sun ingresses Cancer at June solstice. Anyway, in the Northern Hemisphere, we know that December 21st, about winter solstice, is the lowest sun in the sky. So the sun always reaches its height due south, but the height changes throughout the course of the year, right? Highest height at summer solstice time, lowest height winter solstice time. All right, so you can track that altitude with many brilliant things. I'll tell you sometime about a solar pole and doing shadow work to connect to the days and the seasons. But for now, we're going to talk about this, because notice as well that the sun is rising at a different place on the horizon, right? We often think of the ascendant as due east. That is only true for the sun twice a year and for the zodiac twice a day. So this is 3 images of sunrises taken from a farm in Illinois, I believe, as I took it from the internet. In the middle, due east, the sunrise on either spring or fall equinox. All right, and then summer sunrise, summer solstice sunrise, north of east on the left, and winter solstice sunrise, south of east on the right. And again, because this is Illinois, northern hemisphere. So here we go. At equinox time, let's start with vernal equinox, which we know to be around March 21st in the northern hemisphere. And this brings our way what? Tropical Aries. Yeah? So the beginning of Aries, 0 degrees Aries, the last minutes of Pisces, 59:59 or 29:59 Pisces, rises due east. But as we move through the month of March and into the month of April, finishing our time through tropical Aries, the sun is rising further north every day, taking us to Taurus, which rises even further north of east. And if the sun or moon or Jupiter or the ascendant, whatever it may be, rises at, let's say, 20 degrees north of east, it will later set 20 degrees of north of west. Let me actually go back to this and show that a little bit. See, the winter solstice sun sets so far in the northern hemisphere south of east, culminates very low in the south, and then sets south of west. Now, when south of east is rising, north of west is setting. Yeah, so 0 Capricorn, winter solstice, northern hemisphere rising, 0 Cancer, setting. 0 Cancer rises very far north of east and sets north of west. Okay. This is azimuth, this degree measure on the horizon. North is 0 degrees azimuth. East is 90 degrees azimuth. South is 180 degrees azimuth. West is 270 degrees azimuth. Okay. So altitude is about angular measure up from the horizon of 0 degrees. Azimuth is about horizontal measure from north of 0 degrees and 360 degrees. 0, 90, 180, 270 is the convention for azimuth measurement. Okay. And as you can see in this image, the sun does not rise at east 90 degrees every day of the year. In fact, it only does so twice a year at the equinox, right? One of those times brings Aries rising. As we move through Aries, we're rising further of north of east every day, which, by the way, is true for both hemispheres. So this is a very interesting thing because we know about seasonal opposition between the hemispheres. Yeah, we know that Gemini, for example, which brings us to summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, brings the southern hemisphere to what? Winter solstice, right? So Gemini in the northern hemisphere is a very high altitude sign. When the sun is in Gemini in the northern hemisphere, it's very high in our sky at midday in the south. In the southern hemisphere, Gemini is very low at midday in the north, okay? So altitude is opposite for the hemispheres, but azimuth is not. Gemini rises extreme north of east, whether you are in Brazil or Seattle or Turkey or wherever it may be. So this is one of the things that is universal for signs of the tropical zodiac. All right. So 29:59 Gemini brings us to what? Summer solstice, which means the sun stops. Stops what? Stops moving north from east and then turns around. Can you see this in the Cancer glyph? The sun moving in one direction, stopping, turning back to move in the other. And that's what Cancer does. Cancer brings us back home from the northern extreme at 0 degrees Cancer. Now we're coming back towards the south, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, 29:59 Virgo, autumnal equinox in the northern hemisphere, or spring equinox in the southern hemisphere, right? Coming back to the cardinal direction, due east on the rise, which begins with Libra, which sets due west, right? And can you see the Libra glyph being that perfect sunset into the horizon? I believe many of these images that we use for the zodiac are transmissions of the sacred directions, which are honored in the tropical zodiac, which brings us in balance, not with the constellations. Constellations and signs are different things, but with the medicine wheel, with the 4 directions on Earth. and the above and below and the heart. All right, so we also fall in the northern hemisphere from at equinox time. We're continuing this fall in altitude of the sun, fall and winter signs. It's actually, we start falling from the height at Cancer time. We're moving really quickly when we're doing that. Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, bringing us down to the lowest altitude sun, winter solstice sun, at its reach in the south for the northern hemisphere. But you can see here as well, we're moving south of due east on the rise, which also means south of due west on the set as we go into these Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, northern hemisphere fall signs. And then solstice, stopping its southern expression and coming back to the north. Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, which brings us back. You can see in the Pisces glyph and the Libra glyph the only signs with the horizon, can't you? All right. So equinox, equator, especially the sun will set exactly due west, like on a vertical line, that Libra glyph, the sun into the horizon. In the east, the sky does this all the time, especially from the equator. Constellations and stars that rise north of east will go to the north. Constellations and stars that rise south of east will go to the south. And that's very much in the Aries glyph. But if you bring the horizon in and you could look below the ground, you would see that happening like this, like the Pisces glyph. All right. I didn't get to share that yesterday, but I got all the time in the world here, and thank you for joining. All right, one more thing about this. The signs that you see related to one another here by azimuth on the horizon are related by anticia. So Leo and Taurus are anticia to one another. 15 degrees Leo and 15 degrees Taurus rise on the same azimuth. They also culminate at the same altitude. Yeah. So 10 degrees Aries going this way is anticia to 20 degrees Virgo. So if you studied anticia, this is the trip. It is a very much a physical, in nature part of our astrological language. And it's about this rudder, you see? I mean, these signs, right? We're like literally turning on the horizon and then coming back, falling down here in the south and coming back. You see the rudder action in that? So iacos, rudder, helm. One more thing is that the distance from the equinox sunrise, due east everywhere, to the solstice sunrise, which as we saw in Zion National Park is 30 degrees north of east, or 30 degrees south of east for winter solstice sunrise, 30 degrees south of west for winter solstice sunset in Zion National Park. The further you get from the equator, the more stretched this is, and the more stretched the seasons are as a result. So the equator, it's pretty compressed. So are the seasons. This would be more like temperate zones and, you know, up towards the Arctic Circle or whatever I'm trying to show here, right? So this other thing about azimuth, like if I look at the azimuth of Scorpio, for example, let's say 15 degrees Scorpio, that cross quarter point, it's going to be different at Quito than it is at Zion National Park, than it is in Seattle, than it is in Oslo, right? So again, this azimuth, it's not only about the specific degree of your ascendant, your hour marker, iacos, the rudder, it's also about the place where you were born on Earth. So we're going to have a look at this for OPA from Tallahassee, and then I'm going to show you where in OPA's nativity you were born in their houses on the globe. And maybe also if you pay attention or don't get it the first time, you can rewind and look again and see how using the free softwares that I use, you could do this for your own nativity too. You can find out your azimuth, your shamanic direction. If you want help with that, let me know. I do this as like a fun reading, usually for 50 bucks. What's my shamanic direction? I will offer for anyone seeing this video, $33 shamanic direction transmission. If you want to have a very short session with me, they tend to be about half an hour, 45 minutes, and we can look at this together. All right. Take the planets away, and why? Because I want to honor these houses. So again, this, at least the arrangement of the planets in relationship to one another, this waxing half moon, this Mercury Venus applying conjunction in Scorpio, the Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, Chiron, T-square, Saturn retrograde at 32 minutes, Gemini. This was happening everywhere for the entire Earth, yeah? But where it was happening in the sky, that's about houses, right? The houses bring us into our place of birth, where the time brings that scene, the place brings it into our specific frame, yeah? And that's what these houses are about, how the heavens and the earth were married. So one thing I want to point out is look how the midheaven and the ascendant are not square to one another here. Why is that? I'm sure it's something you've noticed before. And I'm going to have to get into another software here. All right, we're going to watch this from Seattle, where I live, because it's at a more extreme latitude than Zion National Park or Tallahassee, where we were looking for the OPA chart. I'm just going to play this through time from 0 Aries on the rise, when everything's a perfect cross, as it is when 0 Libra rises too. You can see that again, okay? When the equinox degrees rising either 0 or Aries or 0 Libra, you'll get the perfect cross, the cardinal directions. But at other times, you can get a trine between the ascendant and the midheaven. You can get a sextile. Watch this motion. This is just during the course of the day. So I think I started on October 21st, and now we're here at 28th. And you'll just see it going through the days. And it's that same motion every day, all right? So the midheaven shifting back and forth from the top of the chart. What is going on there, right? What is that about? What's actually shifting is this, okay? For the Northern Hemisphere above the Tropic of Cancer, where Zion National Park and Tallahassee, Florida, and Seattle, Washington are, the midheaven is always due south. Always due south, okay? But the ascendant, contrary to what we are often taught, unfortunately, is not due east. The descendant is not due west. All right, it's east or east-ish and west-ish, okay? But as we were seeing, you know, we can rise north of east or south of east. We can set north of west, south of west, okay? So the azimuth of the ascendant is changing, which means it's coming in and out of the screen at your face or away from it. We can't do that on a piece of paper. We can't do that on a computer screen. So instead, we symbolize that by moving the midheaven, okay? So I'm going to show you this in a brilliant software that I really recommend all astrologers play with. Even if you're not into this astronomy thing, it will really help inform you about your nativity and about this marriage of heaven and earth, which I think should apply to all astrologers too. This is a free software. Stellarium.org is where you can download it for Mac or for PC. And here it is. It's opening up in Seattle, where I live, and there's a few things I want to change here. Let's do this. I'm going to bring us to Tallahassee, Florida, where OPA was born on October 4th, 2000 at 1:45 p.m. All right, so this is OPA's chart. Just as much as this is OPA's chart, so is this, okay? What did I say about the midheaven for Northern Hemisphere above the Tropic of Cancer? It's always due south, okay? So an hour before OPA's birth, the sun had not yet reached the midheaven. We rise, this is Northern Hemisphere above the Tropic of Cancer, the disclaimer. We rise in the east. We reach the height in the south. We rest in the west and then go below the ground to root in the north. The Southern Hemisphere rise in the east, reach in the south, rest in the west, root. No, reach in the north, rest in the west, root in the south. Okay, but we're talking Northern Hemisphere. It's the last time I'm going to give this disclaimer. All right, so at 12:45 p.m., the sun had not yet reached its height for the day. It had not yet culminated the south. All right, that would happen sometime later. And here's 1:45 p.m. OPA's birth time. All right, so the sun had already south. It was on its way now, having reached to go rest in the west into the horizon. And you can see that here. It's kind of easier, I think, to see if I take the atmosphere away, which I can do in software. But see this, right? Here's, let me move some stuff around. We'll get a better look. This is fun because I wasn't able to take time like this yesterday. We'll take a lot more time in the video course, by the way. But here, moon's about to rise. Let me take the ground away and I'll show that to you. All right. Venus, Mercury, here's that conjunction, Sun, Mars, right? So we can't see this at this time. Why? Because the light's out. And so software can be a really wonderful way for us to connect to the astronomy, which is this, right? What is the wheel of the zodiac? Well, it is the ecliptic. The zodiac is the circle of spirit. And what about the cross of matter inside the circle of spirit? Isn't that how we symbolize the earth glyph? Well, the cross of matter is the horizon, ground, first house, seventh house, cusps, and the meridian, which is a north-south line running from northern hemisphere from the north, the IC, to the midheaven in the south. Okay, so the midheaven, as I was saying before, it's always due south. If I take the ground away, you can see OPA's cross of matter inside the circle of spirit. Circle of spirit is the ecliptic. It's the place where the sun lives because it's defined by Earth's orbit about the sun. That plane, if we extend it towards infinity, we'll find the constellations of the zodiac, which show us symbolically where we are in the signs of the zodiac, though constellations and signs are different things, whether you're a tropical astrologer or a sidereal astrologer. But we have these different crosses that happen during the day. So OPA, I like to say OPA's a righty. All right. And the reason why, northern hemisphere, Capricorn on the rise. All right. So we can, let me bring the ground back in here. And we'll look here. Why are the 7th, 8th, 9th geometries larger than the 10th, 11th, 12th? On a quadrant house system, that would be true for Placidus, Coke, Regiomontanus, whatever. I'm looking at Porphyry again. Why? Because I can see Porphyry in space with my face if it's at night. Skies are clear and I'm on my game, and I'll show you how. Right? Why is this distance shorter from the ascendant to the midheaven than from the midheaven to the descendant? This is why. Azimuth is why. The midheaven is always due south, okay? 180 degrees azimuth, north is 0. But the ascendant is not always due east. Let me just play this throughout the day on this day of OPA's birth. Actually, let's go to the day before. Here's October 3rd at 1:45 p.m. It's a good place to start. Why? Because 0 Capricorn's on the rise. And 0 Capricorn, whether you're northern hemisphere or southern, is the most southern azimuth of the day. The sun moves on the horizon, as we were looking at before, every year when it goes through the signs. You know, from due east, going to the north, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, coming back, Cancer, Leo, Virgo to due east, and falling towards the south, Libra, Scorpio, Sag, coming back, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, due east once again, every year like this, the dance of the sun on the horizon. How long would it take the moon to do that? Every month. Every sidereal month, 27.3 days on average, the moon moves through all 12 signs of the zodiac, and so is going to move through all of the azimuths, all of the altitudes. Saturn's going to take 29.5 years to do this thing, okay? Planetary latitude will add to this, and there's some slight variations which show up in declination. That's a story for another time, and we'll do it in this way if you choose to join the video course in kind of a very visual, contemplate what this might mean. I'm not about transmitting astrological delineation so much about these things. You have your astrology. I'm about reconnecting your astrology to nature. And so we can do this here in these wonderful softwares, but it doesn't do you until you bring this quest to the big screen, to the sky. And I hope this might encourage you to do so. All right, so here's the day before OPA's birth. Okay, so sun every year, moon every month, Saturn every 29.5 years, Jupiter 11.86 years, doing all the azimuths potential. The zodiac does this every day in 4 minutes. So just watch from south of east rising, okay, 0 Capricorn, and I'm just going to move through hours. What's rising now? That would be 0 Aries. How do I know? Because the ecliptic is aligned to the cardinal directions. And when does the sun rise due east? At equinox. When does the zodiac rise due east? Every day, twice a day, when either equinox point rises. How do I know this is 0 Aries and not 0 Libra? Well, not only because the sun in October is in Libra, but also because I know the constellations and how they map to the tropical signs, because I'm a student of the sky. And also I know the altitude of Capricorn is much lower than the altitude of Cancer, which we will see in a second. But first I'm going to take the ground away. We can look at what the cross looks like on this day. If this was December solstice, you would see the sun right there, the sun on the cross. Interesting looking cross. And the first, second, third houses are much bigger than the 10th, 11th, 12th here. We never show that on a chart wheel. Something very interesting, I believe. Anyway, this is 0 Aries on the rise. And here we're moving now towards Aries, Taurus, Gemini until we get to the summer solstice degree rising. Right? Galactic anticenter is very close by, and I know that's here, the hand of the high man Orion. And then it's going to start, like Cancer, coming back in azimuth the other way, coming back until we get cardinal once again. And this is 0 Libra rising. How do I know? It's cardinal, due east rising, due west set, and at very high altitude. I mean, compare this. Let's just go back about 12 hours. Here's Capricorn, which is a very low altitude sign in the northern hemisphere, above the Tropic of Cancer. Aries rising, Capricorn reaching, Libra setting, Cancer rooting somewhere way down there below the screen. And here's 0 Libra rising. So again, cardinal, what's the cross look like now? Gets pretty dang close to the earth cliff, the plus cross. Cross of matter, the ground, the meridian, inside the circle of spirit, the ecliptic where the sun hangs out, spirit, also symbolized by the circle, circumpunct, yeah? So Cancer is a much higher sign in the northern hemisphere, which is why this cross looks different than it did when Aries was rising and Capricorn was reaching. And I'm taking this a lot further than I mean to here, but I would love to share more about that, and we'll talk about altitude and azimuth and these things and bring it home. And actually, this is something that I like to create in homes, help guide people how to earth their chart into their house. So that's something we can talk about another time as well. For now, we are going to get to OPA's birth time, and we will see that the azimuth is moving south of east, and the proper time, 1:45 p.m. on October 4th, 2000, Tallahassee, Florida. Okay, so this is OPA's azimuth right here. This is what I'm calling the shamanic direction. And we can tune into just where that is and trace it on the globe. So this is, I don't think I'm the first to do this. I believe Michael Irvine did this. We spoke to David Cochran, and it seemed to be in his software. I'm still wondering where that came from. We weren't able to speak live, but we were exchanging by email. I would love to see this come into SolarFire and all the astrological softwares, because I think it's a very cool thing. So we can get into, like, this is Astro Gold, for example. It's a really wonderful program for Mac. I mean, it's more simple than SolarFire, but one thing I love about it is I can get into maps. And so this maybe most of you have seen astrocartography, right? The idea is that if OPA was born instead of in Tallahassee, where actually you get pretty dang close to a sun midheaven line. Why? Because OPA was born very close to noon, right? It was noon a little bit west of Tallahassee in the very moment of OPA's birth, which is what this line symbolizes. Here's moonrise. So if OPA was born just east of Florida in the water, the moon would have been exact on the ascendant. I mean, you can see how close it was here, right? You can see how close it was here, right? And this is the place on Earth, this is astrocartography, where if you were anywhere on this line, the moon actually would be right on the ascendant at that time. Mercury and Venus setting, Saturn culminating, etc., right? Astrocartography, it's a wonderful thing. But there's another technique. So let's bring this, we'll zoom in a little bit. We'll zoom into, let's go to Zion National Park, or thereabout, where the retreat was this weekend. So that would be Alaska. Here we go. All right. So right in here, southwestern corner of Utah is Zion National Park. And you don't see astrocartography lines so much there. This is the Saturn IC line. Saturn would be in the 4th if you get to the west of that line. Okay. But there's another mapping technique that I believe was created by Michael Irwine. And it's called local space lines. And I really need to check out Michael's work and read his books and hopefully have a conversation with him about this sometimes. It's a very genius thing in my book. All right, so check out moon. This is a moon line coming all the way from Tallahassee. I'll show you that. Right through Zion National Park. We were 23 miles from OPA's birth moon line, where we were for the Art of Living and Dying retreat in October 2017. All the local space lines are coming out from the birthplace Tallahassee. What are they? It's like literally, if I, when OPA was born, held this little baby OPA up to the sun which was not due south, but was some degrees west of south. South is 180 degrees, and the sun was at an azimuth of, Stellarium will just tell me, which I love, 188 degrees, okay? So about 8 degrees west of south. And there's this sun line coming about 8 degrees west of south. So we could follow that around the globe, okay? And you get these weird projections, yeah? Because we're projecting a globe onto a flat map here, right? So OPA's moon line, which goes from Tallahassee in this azimuth, here's moon, which was at an azimuth of 114 degrees, 29 minutes and 21 seconds. 114 degrees, well, due east is 90 degrees, all right? So 114 is on its way towards the south from due east. And so we see this moon line coming out from Tallahassee, Florida. And it's hard to see why it would come up, but it's because this is a globe projected onto a flat surface. So what we're going to do now is go to a globe with another free program. So Stellarium, totally free. Can be sometimes a drag to get going, install, and learn your way around, as can all softwares, right? Google Earth, totally free. It used to be expensive to get the pro version, not anymore, totally free. So all these softwares that we use are free. So I'm going to show you OPA's moonline in Google Earth, but we're also going to look at this as azimuth here. Let me bring the ground back. I could bring the sky back. It doesn't necessarily matter. I'm just realizing that there are some lines up on that other screen that I don't necessarily want you to see so I'm pausing this. I'll be right back. Okay, so there's a very specific direction where the ecliptic, the path of the sun, the zodiac, intersects the horizon, part of that cross of matter in our earth glyph. Yeah, this is the ascendant. So the rudder is directed here for OPA south of east. How far south of east? Well, in Stellarium, I can bring in this angle measure tool to replace the cardinal directions. Again, south 180 degrees, where the midheaven always is. Okay. A very common misteaching about the midheaven is that it's directly above you. Wrong. That can only happen between the tropics, and only so twice a day. A common misconception about the midheaven is that it's the highest part of the ecliptic. I think you can see that that's not true just here. Okay. This is a very important place. We're going to get back into what that is. But right now we're going to get into this. So what is OPA's shamanic direction, as I like to call it, the azimuth of the ascendant. Where is the rudder pointing? All right. So I can bring in this angle measurement in stellarium, which is wonderful. And we can see that it's about, what, 120, 119, 118, 117 degrees. And I'll just show you what I do without doing it here, because though you're watching this recorded later on, it doesn't mean you want to sit here forever. Okay, but there's this two different tools down here in stellarium. One will show this grid that's aligned to the ecliptic. What we actually want is this one that's aligned to the equator, to the horizon. And I can now zoom further and further in, and this grid comes alive. But now I have to find the ascendant again. And let me just describe the technique without doing it exactly for OPA. Let's see if this works. The new stellarium is a little glitchy on my computer. I don't think my computer is fast enough for it, but it added so many amazing features. Anyway, so if I get in here a little bit closer, you can see some degrees in. Let's just say this is, well, I'm going to get in a little tighter. Thank you for your patience here. I'd rather not edit any of this stuff out later either. Just pretend like I'm having a longer time to deliver this information on the stage and reacting to the mistakes that will come in from technology and whatnot, just as I would. So this is me. Thanks for witnessing me. All right, so we're zoomed in a bit. 117 degrees. Okay, remember, east is 90, south is 180. Okay, so somewhere south of east, right? About 27 degrees south of east, and 5 minutes and 34 seconds. Let's say 34.6 seconds, something like that. So there's 60 arc seconds in an arc minute, just like there's 60 seconds in a minute. So to convert this 34.6 seconds into minutes, I would take 34.6 and divide that by 60. In fact, why don't I? We'll just go full on. So calculator, 34.6 arc seconds divided by 60 to get 0.576 arc minutes. Now I'm going to add that to 5, which is the arc minutes shown here. Okay? And that would say 5.5766666 arc minutes, which is on my screen. I'm going to divide those by 60 because there's 60 minutes in a degree. Okay? So I divide that by 60, and now I get 0.09, and I'm going to add that to 117. Okay? And I'm not as accurate as I was when I measured this before, because I zoomed way in and this comes alive more, right? So forget that number I just read. The very accurate azimuth for OPA ascendant. And again, let me just share this. Let me take this exact, well, yeah, okay, well, no, sorry, interrupting myself. I can't really show you exactly, but if OPA was born closer to the equator, this distance south of the azimuth or the ascendant from due east would be less. Because again, the spread from equinox, due east, due west to the solstices, northeast and southeast, northwest and southwest extremes on azimuth on the horizons, they're compressed at the equator and they increase with latitude as you move away from the equator, either north or south. Okay, so if OPA was born further, like somewhere south in Mexico, this azimuth is going to be closer to east. And if they were born up in like Canada, it would be closer to south. Okay, so 0 Cancer rising, first degree Cancer rising, which is what's happening for OPA, their birth, in Tallahassee by azimuth is a different story than it would be anywhere else, just about. All right, so anyway, I measured this and I found 117.47 degrees. And so I want to show this first because we were looking at this moon line. The moon's in azimuth of, I'm just going to call this 114.5 degrees, right? 30 minutes in a degree. So 114, 29 minutes and change. I'm going to call that 114.5 and show you how I then do this in Google Earth. And so I'm going to close this now. We're going to remember 114.5 for the azimuth of the moon. And again, that brings this line right very close to Zion National Park where we were. So in Google Earth, there's this ruler tool I can use up here. And I can just drop it on Tallahassee. I mean, I would put it on the hospital of your birth. If you know it, you can zoom all the way in Google Earth. And I'm just going to move 100 and, what was that azimuth? You know, I realized there's one more thing I wanted to show you in Stellarium anyway. So there's a reason why I just forgot that moon azimuth so we could go back in here. Because I wanted to talk about the porphyry house system and why I like it, because I can see it in space in my face. So I can just show you in this moment right here, which is this time right now, reminding me I need to get to the airport. Oh my gosh, like right now. All right, we're closing up here very soon. This is right now in Seattle where I live. So the 10th, 11th, 12th house of a porphyry chart just take everything from the midheaven due south to the ascendant and split it into 3 equal slices along the ecliptic. And that's why I say I can see it in space with my face. And looking at the time right now, I'm going to forget this, but look, you can just dial this around the Earth in any azimuth, which you can see the degrees changing here. And so what I'll do is I'll take it to the antipode, which is the opposite side of the globe. And you can see that in Google Earth because the line freaks out right there, you see. So it takes a long time. You got to be diligent. And again, we want to get this for a 1-button click in the astrological softwares. But let's say I wanted to dial into 270 degrees. I'd get around there. The further you zoom in, the more precise you can be with the angle measurement here. All right, let me clear that. And now we're just going to go back to Tallahassee. And I'm going to show you some lines that I already drew. Okay, so let's start with the moon. Right, so the moon line for OPA, actually, right, it's moving south of east because the moon was on the rise in the eastern side, right? Okay, but the moon will also, that line will go all the way around the globe and will come back to OPA on the other side. And that's where it goes right through Zion National Park. And so that's what we were seeing in those local space lines, okay? And so I can do that for all of the planets. And if I do, you'll basically see OPA's natal chart, right? But flipped upside down. Why? Because the midheaven is south for the northern hemisphere, all right? But look, here's Saturn and Jupiter, 6th house. And there's Saturn and Jupiter, those lines. So if I spun the globe around, you could see this go down, just like OPA's natal chart. All right, so what's in the 6th house is Gemini Brett, and it's the number Gemini. So I live right between these Jupiter and Saturn lines, local space lines for OPA. And so what I'm talking about, and I think Michael Irvine also did, but I haven't seen it in the softwares yet, is doing this for the houses. So I can take this azimuth of 117.47 degrees. This is what I call OPA's shamanic direction. And I will say there's teachings. What's rising when you rose is rising within you. Now the midheaven is south, right? So that means this is 12th, 11th, 10th, this way. And above this line is the 1st house. So Brazil is in OPA's 12th house. South Africa is in OPA's 1st house, yeah? And you get to places where you can touch landfall and you can literally cruise from your 12th house to your 1st house and walk across this line. What is that cusp between the 12th and the 1st? It's the birth canal. I mean, you can be reborn in this way every day. You see what I mean? All right, so that line also goes all the way around the globe, but it would be the descendant, right? And because midheaven is south, that would make this 7, 8, 9th like this. So above or south of this line is the 7th house. North of this line is the 6th house. So maybe you were born somewhere along that line. Now I can bring in that due south midheaven and due north IC, and we are going to then find the quadrants, okay? And if I bring in porphyry houses, which I can like this, just equal measurements between ascendant, IC, descendant, midheaven, ascendant, right? So 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, we could see where those live on the globe. But what I'm very interested in is this. There's this point, and we were looking at it before in Stellarium, and I'm just going to do it again for the chart at the moment. I don't know why I keep closing this screen. But again, the midheaven is due south for the northern hemisphere above the Tropic of Cancer, and yet it's not the highest part of the ecliptic. You can very easily see that here for this transit chart in Seattle. The highest point in the ecliptic is here. And actually, let's look at this in Seattle right now. It looks like it's just about Jupiter and the sun. And what it is it's 90 degrees from the ascendant and descendant, which is not due east, due west, but what? Twice a day. Okay, so it's called the nonagesimal, and it's the 10th house cusp of an equal sign house system. So I believe these are the transits for, no, right now in Seattle, Washington. And if I shift this over to equal houses, okay, you're going to see Jupiter and the sun very close to the nonagesimal. That's the highest bit of the ecliptic. And it's 90 degrees to here and here, and it's very much more specific than due north and due south. So it's a very interesting thing if we want to apply, instead of these like angular houses, or sorry, the porphyry houses, or quadrant houses, we can make this a little bit more specific, because due north, due south is going to be the same for everyone in Tallahassee, and in fact, everywhere on that line around the globe. I'm going to instead map the nonagesimals, 90 degrees from the ascendant, descendant. This is the 4th house cusp of an equal sign, 10th house cusp of an equal sign. And then all the 30 degree slices in between allow me to find the equal sign houses for OPA, like this. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. So I live in OPA's 6th house. All right. I love that the art, this very 8th house art for the Career Astrologer magazine about living and dying, came from Mexico in OPA's 8th house. Makes sense, right? This is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I really got to go to the airport, and I'm going a lot longer than I meant to, but we're going to take a quick trip around the globe in OPA's 1st house. This is OPA's 1st house. And now we'll come back in OPA's 8th house. This is, or 7th house. This is OPA's 7th house. Hawaii included, Zion National Park, Sedona. I mentioned that because that's where Maurice Fernandez now lives, OPA's president. Though Maurice Fernandez was born in OPA's 2nd house here in Brunei. And Maurice, by astrology synastry, has OPA's Venus on his sun, I think in OPA's 11th and Maurice's 5th. But that Venus connection that we often see to the 2nd and the 7th houses, how amazing that Maurice was born in OPA's 2nd house, and that when he became president, he was living in OPA's 7th house in Hawaii. And this is OPA's 7th house. This is OPA's 8th house. So 7th and 8th around Australia here. There's Hawaii in the 7th house. Here's 8th house where the art came from. Okay. 3rd house includes most of the eastern seaboard of the United States. And again, these are equal sign houses. Most of Europe, so Oner and Angela, and I mean many Roy, many of the presenters at the conference are in OPA's 3rd house. Communication, actually 48% of the presenters live in OPA's 3rd house. This is the 9th here as we're coming up to the midheaven. So 9th house includes a bit of Papua New Guinea, it looks like there. And here's the IC. So this is 4th house. We'll just cruise kind of quickly through here now. 4th house. And midheaven descendant. So this is the 10th house for OPA. So it'd be good places to go do some career stuff, huh? Not much land offered there. And actually, sorry, that was 9th house. 9th house we're looking at. So we'll go have the vision quest again in the water somewhere. We just looked at the 4th. Here's the 5th house between the green and yellow lines. This is all 5th house, equal sign for OPAs. And then we're going to come back from the 5th and we'll look at what the 11th here between these two slices. So let's look at, this is the 10th and 11th. Yellow to blue 10th, blue to red 11th. All right, so we should go have retreats and community gatherings in the 11th house in South America. 12th house, do some vision quest stuff. The other side of South America, let me reset to it. So here's the 12th house. And then this would be 6th house here, which is going to take us back through Seattle, back to Tallahassee. Now the idea is if you map this for yourself, you know, what if you're going to have a second honeymoon with your spouse? Wouldn't it be cool to go to the 7th house cusp? I mean, what if you wanted to rewrite some vows and work on some of that perfecting the stone and sacred work? What about going into the 6th house, doing that, coming into the 7th house for the ceremony? Again, 12th first for rebirth. What if you want to go to like that line of the 10th house on your chart wheel? Do you want to use the non-adjustable, the equal sign 10th? So I'm saying this can be taken in many ways. And again, I don't believe I'm the first to come to this, but I think it's a really cool way for us to play with our chart in nature. And thank you for playing with me today. I'm Gemini Brett of More Than Astrology. This is me signing out, and I will see you in space.